It is harvest time here in Vermont's land of plenty. 21% of the state's farm sales come from Franklin County. They edge out Addison County's output by just $3 million. And there is the wildlife that takes refuge along the shores of Lake Champlain and the banks of the Missisquoi River.
Hi, I'm Dick Wright, and I've lived in Franklin for about 50 years. It's a pleasant little town and nice people. We have a Catholic and we have a United Church that people are very supportive of, and we have a miniature horse farm here in town, and we also have a fallow deer farm, and we still have a few dairy farmers. We used to have dances at Lake Carmi, which is only about 3 miles away, and there's probably about 300 camps on that. And in the old times, some said it was a shame that lake was in town and it wasn't land, you know. But now it's quite an asset to the village in the town of Franklin.
Natalie Borak is here. She's been out working with photographer Shelley Holt-Allen on daily stories in Franklin County. What's up tonight?
Well, today Shelley and I were in the town of Franklin, where we met a man who wants to help the elderly live out their lives in the town.
As people get older, many are faced with a dilemma of how best to care for themselves. And when those people live in small towns, it often means leaving home to find some sort of group living. But that doesn't have to be the case. Natalie Borak is standing by live in Franklin County to tell us about one town that's working to keep the elderly at home. Natalie?
Well, I am inside the live truck that's bringing us many of our stories from the First Republic 14th Star. Stories like my story today on the town of Franklin that has started a $1.5 million housing project 2 years ago, a project that will keep the people that helped to build the town in it. Every day, Irene Tatro sets out to do her chores alone. Her husband died 13 years ago, and at 74, she says it's getting tough to do everything by herself.
The housework is getting just too much, 7-room house. It's just getting too big. I'm quite anxious for this homestead to be built.
The homestead she refers to is the Franklin Homestead, a proposed elderly housing complex. A small town like Franklin has no place for the folks like Irene to go. So when the house gets too big, they end up leaving town.
Probably St. Albans or Swanton would be the nearest places.
That upset Hugh Gates. He felt the people who helped build this town should be able to live out their lives in it. So he started the Homestead Project. Now he puts in what he calls long and frustrating hours, and for no money. But what he loses in profit, he says he makes up in satisfaction.
I just think it's good and needed, and Franklin is a special place, and it's going to be good.
Going to be once it finally gets started. Gates hopes to use this shovel to break ground in the spring, once the sewage problems are worked out. That day won't come soon enough for the elderly in this town, including Gates' mother-in-law. She says it will be tough to leave her home, but
because sometimes we need to. It gets to be hard to take care of her own home.
It will be a wonderful thing for Franklin. There's so many people living alone around the village. This will free up some of the houses for the young couples.
Irene Tatro has already gotten an offer on her home from a man she once taught back when he was in 3rd grade. He now thinks that her home would make a fine place to raise his own family.
I'm Tim Lewis. When it comes to town types, Franklin County has a single city, St. Albans. In 1970, 2 towns were almost cities, Enosburg and Highgate. There was one bedroom community, Georgia. Business connected with Lake Champlain helped put St. Albans Town and Swanton in the recreational commercial category. But the biggest group were farming towns. Bakersfield, Berkshire, Fairfax, Fairfield, Franklin, Richford, and Sheldon were all in the agricultural town-type category. The last 2 towns were sparsely populated in 1970, Fletcher and Montgomery. 8 years later, Jay Peak helped put Montgomery into the recreational non-commercial category. Changing times in Enosburg and Richford kept them from being in any particular town type. Highgate became a farming community. In 1987, farming had taken over as the driving forces in Enosburg and Richford, but the farm town of Fairfax had changed to a bedroom community. 2 years later, Richford was a bedroom community, and Enosburg continued to hover outside a definite town type.
Some horses are made for smaller things. Bridget Barry has a report. Yeah.
It is Sylvia Messier's favorite time of the day, time to do the chores.
You want some hay? Tell me. Yes? Okay.
No, these are not ponies, they are real horses, even though you can barely see their heads over the stalls. They are called miniature horses.
They require everything a big horse does, only less of it, except for the love, and they'll take all the love you can give them.
And they get a lot of that from Sylvia, but she says they give it back too. She's had a lot of health problems lately and says these horses have given her a reason to live.
They've made it easier. They're very sensitive to what I can do and what I can't do. They seem to understand that they do have to be gentle, and if they do get a little rowdy, that's all I have to do is remind them that it's time to be gentle, and they will be. Can Victoria be gentle? Be gentle. Good girl.
They seem to do whatever Sylvia tells them.
Very good. Show me. Show me. You have beautiful teeth. Well, there they are.
And she relishes in showing off their tricks.
When I ask her if she wants something, if she does, she shakes her head yes. Missy, you hungry? You want something to eat? Yes? Missy, very hungry? You're hungry too?
A helping hand. Sylvia says everyone needs one now and then, but these horses are more than help to her. They are her family.
Sunshine, that's your daddy? You're saying hi to your daddy?
Bridget Barry, Channel 3 News, Franklin.
The experts, the farm economists, continue to tout diversification as the key to vitality down on the farm, the key to survival. And that means that some farms, although not here, have had to move away from dairying.
This is Catherine Malley. These fallow deer helped Don Richard keep his family farm. 3 years ago, he took a chance on what he called diversified farming. Today, it's paying off.
We're not getting super rich, but we've sold, last year we sold $15,000 worth of animals. This year we're going to sell another $15,000 worth. I can't really, I'd say in 3 to 4 years, the next year will be all paid for initial setup.
Richard says the decision to raise fallow deer was a good one. The labor's low, the quality of meat is high, and he adds, they're cute too.
Whenever you turn on a light or make a call in the town of Franklin, you can be sure of one thing. Somehow the Gates family is connected.
Yeah, my grandfather started the telephone company, and that was back when the Bell system was being formed, and they didn't want to serve out in the rural areas, and he wanted a telephone, so he hooked it up.
With the telephone company running successfully, Gates's father saw another opportunity: electricity. Now the two companies run side by side, making Franklin the smallest town to have both its own private telephone and electric company. Gates says it's a pretty good living and believes he offers some pretty good service. But he says the small companies offer something else too.
Yeah, no, we know all of our customers, most of them quite personally, and I think it's something special, and I think my customers realize it and appreciate it.
The railroads were used by raiders going both ways across the international border. We told you earlier about the Confederates coming south to raid St. Albans. Just a few years later, the railroads were used by people going north into Canada.
This is Natalie Borrock. This group of wild Irishmen got a wild idea back in the late 1860s. They wanted their own republic and thought Canada would make the perfect one. So they set forth their invasion, called the Fenian Raid, from the town of Franklin.
Trying to seize Canada, the poor dears, and they, you thought they'd have sense enough they couldn't do that, you know.
They failed and lost one young soldier in the attempt, but he wasn't the only casualty of the Fenian Raid.
There was a deaf old lady that was going to her spring after water, and they told her to halt, and she didn't hear them any more than I would have. And she kept right on going, and bang, she fell dead.
The Fenians left a few things behind, a Springfield rifle and an old sword. Don Richards is lucky enough to have some of these remnants.
These are 50 caliber weapons that were used years ago. You know, in fact, this one here is using, I think both of them were used in the Fenian Raid.
Although the Fenians eventually went their separate ways, their wild spirits were not forgotten.
They were full of fire and enthusiasm, but you've got to have more of that to win a war, you know.
And that's going to wrap up our series in Franklin County. It is time to say goodbye. Parting thoughts, Sharon?
Well, as has been the case actually in all the counties we've been to, once again I've been impressed with the warmth and the friendliness of the people that we've met here. Natalie?
And Sharon, I think the most important thing that I learned about Franklin County is how fleeting history is and how important it is for us to grasp onto us and talk to the people in the towns who know about the history. About 3 weeks ago, photographer Shelley Holt Allen and I interviewed Martha Toll. You saw her earlier this evening on the story about the Fenian Raid in Franklin. Well, since that interview, Martha has had a massive stroke and is not expected to live. From all of us at Channel 3, Martha, our thoughts are with you and your family.